to Futures Talk. We are here today to introduce you with Professor Dr. Gandolfi, Franco Gandolfi. He is from USA and he has served in many different countries and as an academician, researcher, leader, and he is on many publications. He has written books and chapters and articles, as well as he is on the editorial board on many places, and he has also worked in the business world. So today we welcome him and introduce you with Professor Dr. Franco Gandolfi. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here with you.
So, Doctor, would you care to tell us something about your life, like maybe your childhood memories, maybe your education, your family life, your relationship? So that will help our audience to get to know you better.
Certainly. Again, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to get to know you and IQA University. Born and raised in Switzerland, spent many years in Australia, the United States, Dubai, Fiji, Malaysia, Vietnam, and now Pakistan as well. I've always wanted to travel the world in order to learn about the world, meeting different cultures, learning about new people, new ideas. So I've always been excited about life and different people ever since I was a little boy. So coming to Pakistan for the first time at my age, at the age of 52, is a childhood dream come true.
And why is that? How come you have this childhood dream to come to Pakistan?
I had a girl in my high school years who was from Pakistan.
Okay.
And I think she was cute. And from then on, I decided one day I will go to Pakistan, and now that dream has been fulfilled.
And you are still connected with that girl?
Yes, we're still friends. We're still high school friends. Mm-hmm. We have the great thing about social media, as you're well aware, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, you form a group, you keep in touch, you exchange, you share. Obviously, she has had her life, she's married with kids, I'm married with kids, but we still exchange ideas. Mm-hmm. And so it's a wonderful way to get connected and and stay in touch and exchange.
And what about your family? Do they live in USA or they are in Switzerland?
I have family around the world. I have family in Switzerland, in Italy. I have family in Australia. I also have family in the USA, in California. No family in the Middle East or in the subcontinent here. But I have a lot of friends, including a lot of Pakistani friends now. And so even friends become family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what was a life like growing up in Switzerland and then moving to USA, for instance? So what kind of changes you found, the differences of culture? How did you see it when the first time you came to USA from Switzerland? Because I think that they have two different kind of cultures.
Many different cultures. So I grew up, I guess, multiculturally, living in Switzerland, and I had a parent who was from Italy, so I had the Italian influence as well. But also growing up very close to Germany and France, a lot of international influence, obviously. Zurich, living close to Zurich, studying in Zurich, a lot of cosmopolitan influence as well. But I was always intrigued about something new. For me, life in Europe was very predictable.
I see.
And I never liked predictability in life. So venturing out, whether it's the US or Australia or places like Malaysia and Vietnam, enabled me to really stretch and move out of my comfort zone and create a new me and learning. And I'm still learning now. Even coming to Pakistan, some people might say, well, in fact, I've lived in 7 different countries now. They might say, well, you've seen the whole world. No, I haven't. Pakistan is a very new place for me. So even though I have a lot of learning, a lot of different impressions and insights about other cultures, coming to a place like Pakistan is very different, and I have to start again and humble myself and start from the bottom, learning about your culture, your religion, your norms, your values. And Pakistan is a very progressive country. And so only having spent here a few days, I can already see there's a lot of electricity and excitement in this country. The new Pakistan, the progressive Pakistan, which I'm very excited about. So it's fascinating to be here. And I've learned so much in so little time only.
And
Yeah.
how did you get to know about IQA University? How did you find out about IQA University, and created a relationship with IQA University management? So how did that happen? What gave you that inspiration, and how did you network?
You know, it's actually very amazing how social media can really work to one's benefit. And I'm very active in social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. The academic community is actually very small. Once you meet someone, you meet them again, maybe on a different continent, in a different capacity, in a different school. So I got to be introduced to IQA University, and I talked to a few individuals, and then all of a sudden I get an email from the vice president, Dr. Islam, and we chatted and we talked, and we met on Skype, on Zoom, we telephoned, we exchanged WhatsApp messages, and next thing is I'm in Pakistan. So it's amazing how something seemingly so small, an interaction, a common friend, can lead to something like this, where I'm now able to come into your country and then visit IQA University and learn about all the wonderful things that you're doing. So it starts very small, and then once you got the ball rolling, it leads to bigger and better things. It's amazing.
And what made you choose the education field? You were working in different multinational companies before joining academia. So what made you make that move?
Okay, great question. And of course, with my background being Switzerland, I was predestined to learn about banking and finance, which I did. I became an accountant and studied finance and banking, worked for a number of Swiss banks. Then I moved into the pharmaceutical field, had some consulting roles for two very major pharmaceutical companies, but I always had a love for education. I was always interested in developing people. And so as I matured as a person, that interest and that desire to develop people intensified. And so I decided to go and do my PhD and become an academic. So I moved to Australia, did my PhD, became an academic, started working on my publication record, and then I moved to the US. And then I branched into different areas. But even though I've had different administrative responsibilities, including a chair and dean, I was a vice chancellor of a university for a number of years, I have always been a professor, which is my favorite part of being in a university ecosystem, is to develop people, young people, leaders, new generation people.
Yeah, you have done a lot and you've written a lot on leadership. So that's seems to be one of the focuses of your research. So tell us about that, because even in academic world, although as you say that you love the role of professor, but you have taken up as a number of administrative positions. You have been a vice chancellor, as you said. You have been deans to multiple academic institutions. So what about that leadership role? Why do you have such a focus and interest in working on that leadership?
Great question. And as I moved away from a traditional banking and finance and accounting into the more softer aspects of management, I studied strategic management, and I did my doctorate actually in human resources management and change management. And as I was talking to my mentor, my professor, the mentor, he said to me, choose any topic you want, but leadership. I said, why not leadership? He said, it's too complicated, the literature is too large, and we don't know enough about leadership for you to do that well in a matter of 3 or 4 years. So I moved away from that idea of leadership, but in the back of my mind, I was always curious, what exactly is leadership? So after I finished my PhD and published my work in strategic management and general management journals, I started thinking more and more about what leadership actually is. And then I enrolled in a postdoctorate at Cornell University in the US, did my postdoctorate in leadership, and started working on leadership articles as I came to understand the meat, the very body of leadership. And even now, having spent approximately 8, 9, 10 years studying leadership and publishing on leadership, I'm still only at the very beginning about what exactly is leadership and what makes a leader an effective leader. I'm still only touching the surface of leadership. So for any of those out there being interested in leadership, it's a huge field, and it may take a lifetime to really understand leadership.
Tell us a little bit about what leadership is, although you have had such a long experience, such a focus on this particular topic, and you still think that it is just the boundary or the surface that you have covered. Tell us, what is leadership and what is an effective leader and how it is changing now for this world?
Great question. Leadership has been studied for thousands of years. As I said, there's a large body of literature about leadership. And we still don't know a great deal about leadership, and a lot of it is also culturally determined. So what may be seen as a strong leader in one culture may be seen as a not so strong leader in another culture. If there was one word you could use to replace leadership, it would be influence. So influencing people is all about leadership. Now, how do you influence people? And that's where culture comes in. In certain culture, being a leader means to have a position, to be a positional leader, a president, a prime minister, a CEO, a chairman, a university vice chancellor. These are leaders by position. But that's only one small aspect of leadership. You can have leadership in any shape or form. You can have leadership in corporations, in government, in a mosque, in a church, in a family. You don't have to be appointed to be a leader to lead. It's a matter of to what degree are you actually willing, capable and able to influence another person. And in a setting like this, a university, educational leadership is all about the teacher, the professor, the lecturer influencing the students to learn and to develop, and that too is part of what we call leadership.
And how is the educational leadership changing? Especially during the time of COVID-19, we saw that the way we used to work in the universities did not really, we could not function the same way anymore. Most of the universities had to go totally online. Some of the universities, like in Pakistan, some public universities did not have that infrastructure in place, so they couldn't, and a large number of students did not have a school available to them during last 9 months, so it's a long time. And we were expecting it too, like when things were supposed to change. And education, most of the leaders were talking about changing the educational paradigm. They said that the educational system we have had is very old and it needs to change because the production, means of production have changed. We are going towards artificial intelligence, and in this age and time, we need to rethink the role of educational institutions, educational leadership. So how do you see the role of educational leaders changing in a fourth industrial revolution?
So this pandemic, COVID-19, as it's come to be known, has certainly disrupted a lot of industries. In fact, every industry has been disrupted. We don't know for sure to what degree COVID-19 has and will continue to not only transform but actually disrupt education. What I've been really impressed by around the world, whether it's in a place like Vietnam or Pakistan here at IQA University, is to what degree a university was actually able to react to that crisis. And I think what we have also come to know in terms of looking from a management point of view is in times of stress or in times of distress or disruption or crisis, amazing things can actually happen. Some of the best and well-known companies actually started during an era of crisis. So even now, as we speak, in the midst of a crisis, there is disruption going on. And I am sure that even in a place like Pakistan, at IQA University, education is being disrupted. What we're doing right now may have been inconceivable even 8, 9, 10 months ago.
True.
So nobody foresaw this sudden change. But what we have seen is that people are actually incredibly flexible and resilient. So even those professors and lecturers and even students that may not have had that technological prowess or even interest or capacity to do something online, they've had to step up. Not only step up, they have actually thrived in that process. Now, of course, you have different camps. You have people that love online learning, and you have people that don't like online learning as much. And the same applies to probably the administration and the parents and the students as well. For some people, this online learning is amazing. It is very much in line with their thinking and their lifestyle. It's convenient, it's flexible. Others may be a little bit more traditional. They like the engagement between professor and student in the classroom, and the students also meet each other, see each other, and so forth. And so a key aspect, and I had this discussion only a few days ago here in Pakistan with a number of faculty, is how do you actually engage with the students? Engaging with students on campus is very easy. You see each other face to face, you meet in the classroom, you meet in the office, you meet in the hallway. It's easy to engage. How to do that online creates a problem. But again, I have seen how lecturers have really stepped up, and they've come up with very innovative ways to teach their subjects. Granted, teaching online is not easy at all. For anyone to say teaching online is easy, I tip my hat. For me, it's not. I had to learn it. I had to learn it the hard way. I had to find new ways of thinking about my own discipline or disciplines and finding ways to engage with the students. So speaking of leadership and university leadership and online learning, I don't think that a traditional model running a university can be sufficiently effective. I think what it requires in universities is champions, where a head of department or a head of school or a dean or a program chair or even just an ordinary lecturer actually needs to be a champion to take a course and facilitate that course within the system.
Okay, and what about the educational institutions? How do you see their role changing? I mean, to prepare their students and themselves for the new world, and the world is going to change a lot. I mean, artificial intelligence, deep learning technologies, these are coming in a big way now. So, I mean, there is going to be a lot of disruption, and we are anticipating those disruptions. COVID-19 just made it happen. It is more like a trailer for those times that we were anticipating. Maybe 5 years later, 10 years later, we were expecting the smart machines to take up many of our manual jobs that we do, many of the repetitive tasks that we do. So how the role of the educational institutions need to change?
You know, it's a great question, and I wish we had more time to really dissect the question that you have presented so eloquently. I think at the end of the day, the purpose of education is not for the students to get a job. The purpose of education is for the students to be able to think analytically and critically and objectively. And of course, in an online version of learning or education, you can transmit content or the discipline very quickly, very easily. But that's a very transactional view of education. The real magic of education lies in the transformational nature of education. And that requires a connection between the various stakeholders. And so even though in some ways universities are changing and the education system is changing rapidly, the actual essence of education has never changed. The technology has, the methodology has, the pedagogy has, maybe the mindsets have and will too, but the very purpose of education is still the same, has been for thousands of years.
And that is?
For a student and a teacher, lecturer, professor to have a relationship, a role, and for the lecturer, the professor, to help to facilitate that learning, and that learning in itself then has a transformative power, and for the students to be able to be changed. And for the student to be able to think critically, analytically, objectively, and that power can change a person, can change families, can change communities, can in fact change a whole country. So the role of education in the development of a nation, any nation, is beyond measure, is beyond a doubt.
True. And you said that we need our students to be more analytical, they should be more critical, they should be more objective. And this objective point I want to take up with you, because we have been hearing about post-truth world, alternative facts. So in that kind of environment, what do you call objectivity? Like, I mean, there would be some group of people saying that whatever you call objective is objective to you.
Of course. So when I talk about objectivity, I'm not talking about ultimate truth necessarily. When I talk about objectivity, is for a student to be able to embrace various viewpoints. So for instance, in certain organizational systems, and again, that could have a cultural determination, the student simply goes to the lecture, the professor, and basically just adopts and embraces what the teacher teaches. It may be based on a textbook, on a research article, different sources. But I think in an effective system, the professor gets the student to think about the same problem or the same issue from different points of view. And that takes humility, and it takes skill, and it takes a little bit of wisdom as well. And so there must be a love for learning and a love of learning, not just to look at one problem and coming up with one solution, but to look at one problem from different points of view. And some of these points of view may be religiously determined, culturally determined, environmentally determined, and so on. But to look at the same problem from different viewpoints and discussing it objectively, again I'm using the word objectively, is something that universities need to teach, need to provide to the students. So again, I don't think the role of the lecturer is just to present information or the truth or the solution, but to get the student to think about one issue, one problem from multiple points of view.
And assessment in online delivery mode is one of the problems many universities and educational institutions are going through, and they find it difficult to construct those kind of examination where they don't only go to test their memories and their understanding, but to test their higher mental skills. And how are the educational institutions that you are associated with dealing with the assessment in online educational format?
That's a very good question, and I think the measurement of learning and the assessment of the student is one of the main, I call them, problems of any institution, whether it's an institution that embraces online learning or hybrid learning or traditional learning. So assessment is very, very difficult to do institutionally. And so I would imagine, and I'm not an expert, but for many people, teaching an accounting subject or a statistics subject may be a little bit easy because there is a right and a wrong. But in my case, being a management scholar in the social sciences, there may not necessarily be a right and a wrong, so it's a bit more difficult to assess. So for me, the way I have handled assessment, it's not so much for the student, again, to look at a particular solution, but to think about a problem in multiple ways and presenting different scenarios and different solutions. I have always been of the opinion that as an institution, a university, we place too much emphasis on the actual grade, whether it's an A or a B or a C or a high distinction or a distinction or a credit. That does not reflect real life. In real life, it's either pass or fail. It's either right or wrong. It's either desirable or non-desirable. So perhaps, in my humble opinion, we need to move away from overemphasizing what all these grades actually mean, and more thinking in terms of, do we actually see that learning has taken place? And again, it's a philosophical question. What is learning and how can learning be measured? And every scholar, every university faculty, a lecturer, struggles with that very problem. How do we actually measure learning? I don't have an easy answer for that. I've been spending a lot of time talking to my colleagues, working at different universities, debating this, but I feel maybe on a global scale, because I have seen multiple educational systems, I think there is an overemphasis on the actual grade. And perhaps we should think more about what actually is learning and how do we measure learning effectively. What do we want our students to be able to do or understand at the end of a course or a program and so on?
And in the universities, whenever we go for accreditation with any organization, they have their own standards that they want us to implement. And where do you stand in terms of standardization of higher education? Do you think that it's a good idea to go for standardization, or do you think there should be some kind of flexibility that needs to be there?
It's a great question, and again, I've spent a lot of time in my years as an administrator to talk to various institutions and faculties about the importance of standardization, of accreditation, and so forth. And so, what accreditation does is accreditation is a standard. It's basically evidence what we do. It's actually external validation of what we do internally. Again, I feel there is probably an overemphasis on accreditation, but accreditation is important. So a university like IQA University with a university license needs to be accredited, whether it's regionally or provincially or nationally or even internationally. But beyond that accreditation, there still has to be flexibility, where each of the school can bring in its own unique flavor. You still want to be you still want to be IQA University despite your accreditation. And you can never hide behind your accreditation. Again, accreditation is like a stamp of approval, a stamp of quality. You are good. And there is every reason for that stamp to be valid. But beyond that, you need to go to the next level for the sake of all the stakeholders. And again, there is a role for standardization, but there's also a role for individualization, where each school, each faculty, each lecturer has to bring in its own kind of flavor to really create what I call a conducive learning and teaching environment.
Okay. Another question that comes to my mind is about the COVID-19 has proved that we are living in an interconnected, interdependent world, and something that happens in a small town of China can impact the whole globe. So in that kind of scenario, how do we increase and enhance collaboration and cooperation among higher education institutions of the Western developed countries and the developing countries?
It's a great question, and I think it's a question we need to ask our students, because our students are the ones that are so amazing at interconnecting. I mean, I've met quite a few university students at IQA University, and I can see how engaged they are with social media, whether it's a TikTok or an Instagram or a Facebook or LinkedIn. They have shown us seniors how easy it really is to engage and collaborate and to exchange. And so we have to learn from them that technology is a wonderful way of connecting us in the world. See, once upon a time, not so long ago, a university needed to be excellent regionally or locally. Yeah. And then there was an emphasis on, well, we also have to be good nationally. But now it's international, it's global. You have to be the best in your field, not just the best in your town, yeah, or the best in your region or in your province or even in your country. You need to be excellent on a global scale. And so you will be benchmarked against everyone everywhere. And students have opportunities now. They can go and study abroad, they can go and take courses online, they can go to other universities and study other courses if they wish to. So they have options now. And so we as a university, we have to make sure that what we provide is so compelling to the students that they will not leave. They need to see IQA University, students for instance, they need to see that IQA University is interconnected with the rest of the world and has sister school arrangements with many people, with many universities outside Pakistan.
And you have done a lot of research, I see that. And in the research, whenever we are doing research in a university, most of the researches are done by single professor. And how do we involve other researchers in the same kind of project? How do we involve professors from different university to participate in this in one project? And as you said, like, I mean, when you look at the problem, you have to look at it from different point of views. So that interdisciplinary approach, how do we bring that to one single project? Like you are working on leadership skills in management. How do you involve someone coming from anthropology who's working on it and some economists working on it? So how do we enhance that? do we need to have some kind of institutional support, or we can do that on our own as a professor too?
Okay, it's a great question, and I really appreciate that. And of course, you could look at it from a top-down approach where the administration basically mandates you need to do research, you need to engage in scholarship. Ideally, we want you to collaborate with fellow faculty, maybe across disciplines, maybe even across institutions. That could be a top-down. But I also believe in a bottom-up. I believe that this should come from the heart of the lecturer. I want to give you an example. In this year, 2020, I had the opportunity to work with a colleague in Malaysia, and she actually is an expert in education. And so we met about a couple of years ago at a conference, and we started talking about her field and my field. And I said to her, you know, you study what's called critical pedagogy, and I study servant leadership. I wonder what the two have in common. And first we realized nothing. They have nothing in common. But then we said, hey, come on. There has to be something where we can kind of find a commonality. And sure enough, as we both studied each other's body of literature, we realized, there are some commonalities. And so we started developing those, and we wrote a conceptual paper. We sent it off to a journal, and they really liked it. And so now, 18 months later, we have published 3 papers on the intersection between critical pedagogy, her field, and servant leadership, my field. So what seemed like 2 completely foreign disciplines, we have now married. And I think that can happen to many people. That can easily happen to a management scholar with an engineering scholar, or perhaps somebody who is now engaged in robotics or genomics or artificial intelligence. Maybe they can meet an accountant or a finance professor. Let's look at some commonalities. I think there is a lot of, I think the best research in the next 5 to 10 years will now come from transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary. Again, it depends on the culture. It may need to come from the top down, from the administration, but ideally I would like to see more and more faculty taking the initiative to find out, hey, how can we collaborate? And some cool research will emanate from that.
Okay, you have brought in that servant leadership term, and when I was looking at your research, I mean, it is one thing that you have done a lot of research on. So tell us, what is this servant leadership concept?
You know, it's an interesting concept because a lot of people would typically say these 2 concepts, being a servant and being a leader, cannot coincide. Yeah. But I've spent a lot of time thinking about these 2 terms, and I feel there is a role of servant leadership. In fact, I believe it's one of the most effective roles of a leader is to be a servant. So a servant leader is one that, let's say, goes to a situation or goes to an institution or even is in an education environment and says, what can I do for you? How can I serve you? That is one position of leadership. Not, I am the professor, or I am the vice chancellor, or I am the CEO of an organization, so therefore I'm a leader. No, I am a servant. What can I do for you? How can I serve mankind, womankind? That's the concept of servant leadership. It's a very effective way of looking at it. It's a very powerful way of looking at it. More research needs to be done, especially in different cultures. The servant leadership concept has primarily been researched in the Anglo-Saxon world, US, Western European countries, and so on. I think it needs more evidence about its effectiveness in a country like Pakistan. I've done a little bit of research in Malaysia. So that needs more work. And some of it may be also challenging, socially, culturally, as well as religiously. But again, I believe there is great scope. And it's something I would like to pursue. How servant leadership actually can play out in a country like Pakistan.
And it's a very important concept, especially the kind of environment we are living in and what we are expecting in the future. We need to have our leaders who are ready to serve, because most of the time we find leaders serving their own interests.
Absolutely.
And whether they are business leaders or politicians, then we need to change that. So your research is highly important, I think.
Thank you.
And I mean, it brings us to almost the end of this talk. And I would like to know, like when you have visited IQA University, you have met with a number of faculty, you have met with the staff, you have met with management. So what's your impression? Because you have been associated with a number of different countries, academic institutions. You've been in Malaysia, you've been in Fiji, you've been in Australia. So, I mean, living in 7 different countries, meeting a faculty from all over the world. What are your impressions of IQA University, the staff, faculty, students? I mean, you didn't get to see students that much, but the institution overall, what are your impressions?
Okay, very positive, and I am thrilled that I'm here at IQA University, and I've had a wonderful week engaging with the senior management, with middle management, with the lecturing staff, and so on, with staff. A few students I've met as well. And it's a very vibrant place. It's a very energizing place. It's a very hopeful place. And IQA University depicts exactly what I had in mind before I came to Pakistan, that this is a very progressive country. I think the country is changing at an enormous rate. And it's great to see. And I think universities play a very important role in not only fostering reform or change, but again, enabling the students to reach their potential. Again, it's all about the development of the person. Now, development of the person takes place in multiple ways. It can work out, it can be established in the home, in the workplace, but also at the university. So universities play a very, very pivotal role in the development of the people. And I see IQA University as a very modern, a very sophisticated, a very vibrant, I'm going to use the word electrifying place. There's high vibrancy and high energy at this place, and I am very hopeful, and I'm very positive that this is going to be a powerhouse in the university ecosystem in Pakistan, and that the best days of IQA University are ahead, yet ahead. So it's amazing.
Appreciate your comments, appreciate your presence. If there is anything that you want to talk about, anything that you want to highlight, please feel free.
Thank you so much. You know, I don't think the world knows enough about Pakistan. I think I am the first one among my colleagues that have had the opportunity to come to Pakistan. I would like to see more people have the opportunity to come to Pakistan or to engage with people in Pakistan. And I guess what we have seen with the pandemic, that now all of a sudden Zoom and Skype and Blackboard make it possible for people to engage very easily, very quickly. And at the end of the day, we're all the same. We're all humans, right? Yeah. We may have different cultures and different religions and different backgrounds, but we're all the same. We're all human. And I think once we realize that the humanity part is what brings us together, we can do great things.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching us. We welcome Dr. Franco Gandolfi at IQA University, and we hope to see him very soon, shortly, maybe in February from a spring semester, I hope. So thank you, and see you again.